Ik praat niet Afrikaans niet, maar ik verstaan. So, be careful what you say around me. If you're on the London Tube, you start saying something bad about somebody.
Yeah.
I've actually done that. I've been on London Tube for the Olympics in 2012. There were some Afrikaners on the tube, and they were talking some nonsense about some people in the tube. And I said something in Afrikaans, basically like, be careful, People understand. You're like, whoa. It was 20 after when he took my call, and we talked until the top of the hour when he ended the program for 40 minutes. People are like, who is this oak? Where do we find him?
Yeah.
How does he know so much about South Africa? And it just sort of started snowballed from there. And I suddenly became the shiny penny that everybody wanted to have on their program. When I said to myself, I'm not doing this for fame or for money. I'm doing it to enlighten people and to get people to think. So it's never going to be any bigger than this. If I ever get to 50,000, I'll be pretty excited. And I kind of gave up. I wasn't really hinging on it because it's not my primary vocation. It's a side thing. But then I started covering the behavior of Nobs and Kesey at the end of the year on the FlySAF air flight to Cape Town when she attacked the flight attendants and was a racist towards colored folks. Now, look, I've moved in circles with the most powerful people in the world. That's not a boast, it's a statement of fact. I mean, I wrote for the President of the United States when I was an intelligence analyst at Defense Intelligence Agency.
Wow.
I've worked with presidents and prime ministers and generals and, even monarchs all over the world. To me, though, the success of this, where people don't get lost in this, and I think you can relate to this, is you have to have something that grounds you. For many people, that's faith. They don't let it go to their head. You have to remain humble. Another thing is, to my experiences in Africa, I would go around in uniform and I'd meet lots of Africans all over the continent. And a lot of people be very shy and nervous around people in uniform because they're afraid of the military. And I'd say, what's wrong? Well, I don't like soldiers. Why? Well, soldiers, they kill people and they murder people and they rape and pillage. And I said, no, those aren't soldiers. Those are thugs in uniform. Professional soldiers protect people, property, and lives. That's what they do. Bigotry is learned. You're not born that way. You're not born racist. You're not. But what I find is that people are truly racist, who truly believe that white is better than black or black is better than white. That's in their heart. It's hard to change those people. The response from the South African government about HIV money and PEPFAR, which we've given for 22 years in a 5-year emergency program to give countries 5 years to get the resources together to address the AIDS pandemic in their countries. 22 years later, $143 billion, and 30 million people haven't died because of HIV, because of our intervention. And what do we get from the South African government? Well, the Americans only contribute 17% to fight HIV, and their money doesn't matter. And the bottom line is this. I think the G20 is a joke, personally.
Okay.
The problem with organizations is the bigger they get, the harder it is to reach consensus and get things done. The G20 can't get anything done. It's another Kaffeeklatsch.
Chris Wyatt, welcome to the In HeinzSight BoldCast. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks a lot, Heinz. In hindsight, is that a play on the name Heinz?
Absolutely, yeah. And I try to get my guests to use the word in the interviews, and then I do the aha moment because it's something that I've done in casual conversations before.
Have I just stolen your thunder by mentioning that?
Just a little bit, but it's okay. I forgive quickly. But thanks for meeting with me online all the way from the States. I really appreciate it. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm very well. Thanks for inviting me to come on the program. It's a pleasure to get a chance to chat with you. And I just wish that we'd made this acquaintance when I was in your neck of the woods just a few weeks ago. We could have done this in person. Maybe the next time I get there, we could sit down and have a conversation, because I think we both realize that in person is the best way to have these conversations. But at least we have technology that lets it do it this way.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd rather jump on this opportunity than wait. But when you are here again, I would love to show you one of the most beautiful places in the world, which is where I live, and we can get together and talk in person. That'll be good. But for now, let's jump into what you're busy with and what you're standing for and fighting for. I just want to say thank you. I have a lot of respect for what you're doing. The reason we call this the BoldCast is because we believe boldness is contagious, and I think we live in a time where it's so necessary for those who do speak boldly and fearlessly about the truth. That's important. That we would, have as many of us speak up for that which matters. So thank you for doing that, and I trust that your boldness has been contagious already to many, and hopefully it will be today as well. So first and foremost, for those who may not know you, that is on my platform, you have an amazing CV of things that you've done in your lifetime. 36 years in military service. You've been in 16 countries, many of them African nations. You know 6 languages. You've done so many things. You've seen so many things. And then now you have a YouTube channel. You're communicating to the world. Maybe give us a first impression of, listen, this is my story, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. What has moved you to talk about the things you're talking about, to put your name and your face out there? What drives you to do what you're doing today?
Well, Heinz, it's kind of ironic. The intent wasn't to put my face out there to go out and be out in the scene. But what happened was I retired from active duty from the U.S. Army in October of 2019 after 36 and a half years, 34 in active duty, 2 in the Ohio National Guard when I had left the Army to go back and finish university.
Okay.
And I started a consultancy because I have been seeing Africa as the next big thing. And let me explain what I mean by that. Asia saw its massive wave of economic growth and population growth in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and it's there. The population isn't really going to grow much more. There'll be more wealth in Asia, but it's not going to grow much more. But the next exponential growth, the big opportunity on the planet, because after the Second World War, the rebuilding Europe, that was the first phase. Europe, that was a big place for economic opportunity. Then came Asia. To me, Africa, no matter what happens, even with people emigrating off the continent, by the year 2050, Africa will go from 1.3 billion to 2.3 billion people roughly. And by my own estimation, looking at the numbers and demographics, that's actually something I have training in demographics. Looking at that, I anticipate a consumer class of 900 million people in Africa. And I'm looking at this from a purely capitalist standpoint, to be quite honest, because I think capitalism lifts people out of poverty. And it's the best system we've ever devised for human trading. But anyway, so I looked at this and said, that's 3 times the size of America's population when I came to this conclusion about 20 years ago. And I said, well, if America wants to remain an important country in the world and influential, we have to get engaged in Africa in the business sector. Now, I was in the Army at the time, but I was looking ahead. I'm always looking down the road 5, 10, 15, 20 years of where things should be and where I'm going to be. And I said that we need to do something. So when I retired, my plan was to start a business consultancy to encourage American businesses to get involved in Africa. You see names like Caterpillar and Boeing and Microsoft and Ford in Africa, but you don't see Verizon, you don't see Xfinity, you don't see a lot of American brands. They're just not there for a lot of reasons. Most American firms look at Africa, if they even notice it, and they see what I call CQ, chaos, corruption, and coup d'etat. And that's what they see Africa as. And in many respects, that's been true for over the history. And when I started telling this story, the coups died down. But then unfortunately, they picked up after COVID. We've had a lot of coups in West Africa, so it kind of ruined that narrative. But basically, the CQ. And so what I was trying to do is use my experience in Africa, my understanding of Africa and cultures and language and business to encourage American business. And I started this consultancy right after I retired. And then the COVID nonsense came along and I couldn't travel. So quite by happenstance, I said, you know what, I've got a YouTube channel. I should make some videos because I've been doing a lot of podcasts and I've been doing a lot of lectures my last couple of years as an instructor at the Army War College, professor there, all over the world, in London, in Vancouver, in Denver, in Chicago. So I've been traveling all over giving these lectures, and I figured, well, I should record some videos of myself talking about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, counterintelligence, terrorism, and trade opportunities. And I started making these videos, and I had a large...
Sorry if I can interrupt you there. I apologize. Yeah. As a lecturer at the War University, what was your focus, the subjects that you were focusing on?
Well, my title at the Army War College was Director of African Studies, but I was also Professor of National Security Strategy and Studies. So I taught macroeconomics, I taught geopolitics, international relations, diplomacy, theory of warfare. We covered things like, of course, Sun Tzu, the Arthur Shastra, Alfred Thayer Mahan. All the different theories of war. Thucydides was a big part of what we taught our students. And we covered a lot of things. So we also had a regional studies course, and that was one aspect of the academic year. And that's where I taught African studies. And so
amazing. Okay, so it's right up your alley, all of this. Yeah, that's amazing.
Oh, yeah. No, you mentioned 16 countries. I've lived in 16 countries, but I've worked in over 80 around the world.
Wow. That's not many people can say that.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Well, that's a true statement. Yeah, but so I've lived in those 16 countries, which just means I've moved a lot. Picking up a movie isn't always fun.
Yeah.
But so I started making these videos. I had a reasonably large audience on LinkedIn because for years, as an intelligence professional, as a military officer, I had to be circumspect about what I did in social media. I can't just put anything out there. So I did have a social media presence with my background listed on LinkedIn. And because I was at the War College, a lot of people would start following me. And I took a lot of news articles while I was at the War College, and I would post them on LinkedIn and put some commentary in there, some analysis. And that got me a large following, about 10,000 people. So I figured maybe I could turn that into a YouTube audience, and I put it on there, and I got a few followers. But really what happened is that I wound up calling into Ronaldo Khus program 5 years ago when someone was talking nonsense about South Africa that meant well but didn't know what they're talking about as South African.
Oh, okay.
So I was out exercising, walking through apple orchards, and it was angering me. So I called in during his show. He was letting people call in for 2 minutes, and it was during lockdown, the early stages. You call in to talk for 2 minutes, and then he said, that goes on the next person. It was 20 after when he took my call, and we talked until the top of the hour when he ended the program for 40 minutes. People are like, who is this Oak? Where do we find him?
Yeah.
How does he know so much about South Africa? And it just sort of started snowballed from there. And I suddenly became the shiny penny that everybody wanted to have on their program. I was on Renegade Reports. I was on that guy from Down Under and a bunch of other programs. And that started to help me build an audience. And I built an audience in about 5 months from 2 to 23,000 subscribers. And then YouTube censored and took my channel away in April 2021 over a bogus claim that I did something violating their standards, which I never did. And that channel was in the gulag for 2 years. I started a new channel, and that's a channel I have now that has over 100,000 followers, which actually it only got to 20,000 by December 31st of this past year, when I said to myself, I'm not doing this for fame or for money. I'm doing it to enlighten people and to get people to think. So it's never going to be any bigger than this. If I ever get to 50,000, I'll be pretty excited. And I kind of gave up. I wasn't really hinging on it because it's not my primary vocation. It's just a side thing.
Yeah.
But then I started covering the behavior of Nobs Mkhize at the end of the year on the FlySAF air flight to Cape Town when she attacked the flight attendants and was a racist towards colored folks. And I started getting more views. And then next thing you know, Trump's coming in. So I started making more videos about Trump. And then the refugee program started. And I zoomed to 100,000 subscribers. And it's despite the shadow banning and the efforts by YouTube to hide my content for even my own viewers, I have a pretty decent audience. So I'm getting about 10,000 per live stream now that show up. And that's pretty amazing because I did this for 4 or 5 years with 40 or 50 people showing up because I didn't do it for fame. It's never for fame. It was to enlighten people and get people to think. So that's a little bit about that. And that's how I got into this, but it wasn't intentional. I've been famous before. I rebuilt the Armed Forces of Liberia after the Civil War. Being famous isn't all it's cooked up to be. I think you probably know that.
Yeah, we can talk about that. You had a different kind of fame than what I tasted. But I think in essence, it's the same, and what I try to tell people is that when you get there, it's not all you thought it would be. It's actually quite empty. Like you say, you kind of realize that there's a deeper meaning behind what you're doing, and where I can relate to that story very, very, in a small way, is when I did the Idols competition back in the day. You would get this question a lot. So why did you want to be famous? And I said, I didn't do this to be famous. I did this to get a record deal. I wanted to make music for a living. And so I really entered to make music for a living. And then fame was a byproduct that you actually needed to manage. And it sounds like you had a taste of that as well.
Well, and I have at different times. I mean, look, I've moved in circles with the most powerful people in the world. That's not a boast, it's a statement of fact. I mean, I wrote for the President of the United States when I was an intelligence analyst at Defense Intelligence Agency.
Wow.
I've worked with presidents and prime ministers and generals and, even monarchs all over the world. So that's interesting. To me, though, I think the success of this, where people don't get lost in this, and I think you can relate to this, is you have to have something that grounds you. For many people, that's faith. They don't let it go to their head. You have to remain humble. And while I sometimes joke around, particularly in my podcast, about things, at heart, I'm a humble person. I don't boast. If you look behind me, you don't see any of my dozens and dozens of military decorations or awards from Germany or from Liberia, orders I've received, not because I'm ashamed of them, but because at the end of the day, they're wonderful and I appreciate them and I'm glad that it happened, but it's not who I am. It's just something that I did along the way. And I don't walk around, puffing my chest out with all my medals, because if I did, I'd be leaning over to one side. There's so many. Yeah.
That sounds like one you practiced before. I like that. That's very cool.
I don't know if I practiced that before, but that's usually I say a Polish war hero, but anyway.
I do see a YouTube award there that you do have, and I'm assuming that's for the 100,000 followers or subscribers.
And that is correct.
That's
and
pretty cool.
Well, it is kind of cool, but here's a little short backstory behind that is that I never thought I'd ever see that award. And then when my channel just started blowing up seriously this year in February with the refugee thing, because within 2 hours of Trump announcing the refugee program, I was live on air explaining it. And I guarantee you that virtually everything I've said has been 100% correct about the program all along, because as an intelligence analyst in the Army, among many things I did in the Army, I have to take limited information and come out with the best, prediction or estimation of what is actually happening. And it served me very well in what I'm doing. But that plaque, I never thought I'd get to 100,000. And several South African content creators like, oh, you'll get there, Chris. You get there. I'm like, yeah, you guys are smoking your socks. I'm never going to get there. and then what happened was suddenly it took off. I was gaining 1,000, 2,000 subscribers a day for a period there. And I got to 50,000 while I was before I went to South Africa. And then I got to about 80,000 for my recent trip from South Africa back. And I said, I'm not going to make it. But when I told people, I said, kind of tongue in cheek, I said, if I ever get that plaque, I'm going to go out in the woods right across the street here with a 12-gauge shotgun. I'm going to blow the crap out of it, and then I'm going to put it on my shelf, and I'm going to show it to you, and then you'll never see it again, because that's how I feel about YouTube. It's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
But here's what happened. I did several polls with my audience, and it's like 90% of the people almost all the time want to see the plaque. And then I realized, the plaque isn't about me. It's about the other 99,999 people, because I also subscribe to my channel, who signed up for my channel. And, so out of respect for them who took the time to become subscribers and often watch my content, I owe it to them. So that's why that's up there. It's not a vanity thing. It's paying it back to my audience. And that's why I put it in. The other problem is that a couple weeks ago, I was on air and YouTube fraudulently claimed that I was waving a firearm and gave me a timeout. There was no firearm. I was just sitting here in my studio with my hands. And so my channel was shut down for 24 hours. I couldn't live stream. So I asked them why, and they said, well, we've looked at it and you had a firearm. I'm like, you're smoking your socks. I don't have a firearm.
Wow.
So I realized that even though there's lots of firearms and shooting on YouTube, I can't risk taking a 12 gauge and blowing my sign up. So that's the other reason why it's not blown up.
But that's amazing. Yeah, obviously they're keeping an eye on you, it would seem, because there is definitely a lot of other videos with guns on it. I mean, just the gun shows that you have, and anyway, but that's crazy.
Oh, hi. So listen, you don't even know this. We won't get into this, but you don't even know the half of it. When they started targeting my original channel in April, or in February of January 2021, during the lockdown, they got me on January 6th. I was actually in DC as a journalist covering those events. I was within right there where they were throwing water bottles and the police were spraying us with tear gas. I was there as a journalist. That day I got a warning for another video, which I didn't do anything. They claimed I had medical misinformation. I didn't even talk about COVID, and they gave me a warning on that. And that's how it started. But I had dozens of videos removed by YouTube over things that I never did. I did a video with Wendy A. Alberts, the CEO of the Restaurant Association of South Africa, trying to encourage people to go out on Valentine's Day to restaurants because the lockdown had been eased and restaurants were suffering and closing. And I did the video. It was 15 minutes long, no children, no discussion of children, no allusion to children, no mention of children, no images of children. And my video was taken down a week later for child safety policy violation, even though my videos are blocked for children to watch. And I appealed it within 15 minutes. Apparently a human saw it. They restored it and apologized. Then an hour later, they removed it again. I got it restored. And then an hour later, it was removed again. And that was one of dozens of videos that was clearly being targeted by trolls and by YouTube, who had no mechanism to actually, control that. So I've been through all this through the ringer. So the problem is that, lots of people on YouTube and lots of people on social media that sit around eating crisp and have never done anything in their life and have big followings because they either got a big nose that people like or they have pert bodies, that bleachy blonde hair that people like. And they're not a threat to YouTube. But people who know the facts, who've been there, done that, have the receipts. I always provide the receipts. And that frightens people in power. Anyway, there you go.
That's quite a mouthful. I can hear that just from how you speak. There's so much experience and information that is going around in that mind of yours. It must be frustrating sometimes if you're trying to get so much across in a short amount of time to people who do not have the context that you have. It must be quite hectic. But is that something you've now honed? Like you can take the massive amounts of info and kind of make it palatable for the masses?
Well, actually, you make a very interesting point because last night that topic came up. I do a show called Night Owls, which I've done since the refugee thing has popped up because so many people were asking refugee questions and I was exhausted from it. So I started doing a Night Owls. I do it at 11 o'clock my time, so it's 5 a.m. South Africa, and I actually get a decent audience. But last night the topic came up, and I said, one of the strengths I have because of what I've done over the years, also the nature of my character. I grew up very much an introvert until I went to university at the age of 17, and that all changed. But because because of who I am and my experiences, I like to tell people. I mean, I've lived in abject poverty where we had no plumbing. I fetched water from a cistern, milked cows, and then had no electricity. Not because of ESCOM, but just because we didn't have any money. And that lived off of food stamps and public assistance. And I've also lived in upper middle income as a kid. And I've done well for myself. I'm not wealthy, but I'm not going to be eating cat food, mostly because it's too expensive these days. But but I'm not going to be eating cat food anytime soon. But back to your point. I've moved in all kinds of circles. I mean, I've briefed the President of the United States. I've briefed the President of Liberia, Botswana, multiple countries all over the world. Been with people who can't scratch two rand together to survive. Been to Shoshiguvwe, Alexandria, Kailicha, Guguletu, all these places and places like that all over Africa. Monrovia, been to Congo Town. And I've moved in all kinds of circles, diplomatic circles, military circles, poverty, businesses. And for me, I think I have the ability to take information and distill it for the audience I'm speaking to. Yeah. So if I'm sitting in a room with Cyril, even though I'm not a fan, I would find a way and have a way to address him properly with the right protocol, and also have, I believe, a way to reach him. Not that he would listen, but my point is that I can move because kind of like a chameleon. As a kid, I moved around so many times, went to over 30 different primary schools and junior high schools, moving almost every week at some point in life, that I was always the new kid and always the outcast, and I had to adapt. And so I learned how to adapt to environments and become part of the background around me. Otherwise, I would have been bullied and picked on. And I think that, plus my interest in languages, I speak 6 languages to varying degrees. But the biggest problem challenge I have is that, as you said, that the solid state hard drive that's encased in this cranium up here is so full of data that at times I have to speak with machine gun, rapid fire, Gatling gun speed. Yeah. And the problem for the Afrikaners in particular is, whoa, slow down. Yeah. And then the good news for me is that when they write to me or they ask me things, I get it because as I told you before we went on air, ek praat nie Afrikaans nie, my son. So be careful what you say around me. If you're on the London Tube, you start saying something bad about somebody. Yeah. I've actually done that. I've been on London Tube for the Olympics in 2012. There were some Afrikaners on the tube, and they were talking some nonsense about some people in the tube, and I said something in Afrikaans, basically like, "Be careful," People understand. You're like, whoa.
Yeah, no, I've learned that a long time ago. You're not safe in London with Afrikaans. Long time, like even when I was a student, it was already becoming a thing. So yeah, but I wanted to get back to something that you said earlier. That you use the word, you want to enlighten people. It seems to be behind the drive that you have, the passion that you have. Why exactly that word? Why exactly that focus? And what do you mean by that, by enlightening people?
Well, the first thing I mean by that is I want people to think for themselves. So many people on this planet are influenced by the shiny new toy, over here. And what we see is that the media in particular, and our universities play a role in this too now, but the media in particular create narratives, and oftentimes they have an objective behind the narrative, and it's not honest for whatever reason. And we're talking about left and right. But my point is here, I want people to think for themselves, and that's why I provide the receipts. And I tell people, you don't have to believe anything I tell you. I mean, if you don't want to believe my bona fides and my experience and my track record of, predicting, which is pretty good, actually, then that's your prerogative. It's not my place to force you to believe to my beliefs. But I unashamedly will tell you that capitalism is the best economic system devised by man. Representative democracy is the best form of governance we've ever come up with. And I've lived all over the world and seen every form of governance and every economic system and the way that people behave. And so to me, I want people to think for themselves. And of course, I want them to watch my content, tell people about it, because we get a bigger audience and we influence people. And I've been trying desperately to get South Africa is one of my big focus areas, get South Africans to get engaged. And like Americans and Europeans, they're so disengaged from what's going on. People like to complain. They like to moan about things. But the biggest problem I have is that people the biggest challenge for me, this is why I'm so passionate about it, is that people just spew things. Like, for instance, 80% of whites voted to end apartheid. Actually, that's not what happened. 62% of people in the 1992 poll or referendum that they put out there, the National Party, said that they would like to see a change towards representative democracy, essentially. That's not the same as saying 80% of white people voted. It doesn't diminish what happened. But, you got to deal with facts here because it has a bearing on what's going on. And also this nonsense about transformation in South Africa. To me, that's a code word for racism and black supremacy. And what I mean by that is that there's no transformation in South Africa. You're transforming from a first world to a fifth world country. It's in progress right now, unfortunately. And the problem with the transformation is that the effort is to punish groups of people, whites, coloreds, and Indians, for behavior in the past. But the real problem with that, Heinz, is that over half that population was born under ANC rule. They've known no other party controlling the country for over 30 years. Yeah. So why should those people born after 1994 be punished for the actions of people in 1962 or 1976? That's just immoral. And so I like to get people thinking about that, and I like to bring these topics up, which of course makes me a lightning rod and a target for right-wing nut jobs, left-wing nut jobs, the flying monkey crowd on the left wing, and then black supremacists. So, hey, I get equal opportunity hate from all over the place.
I'm sure people have tried to label you, label you to the right mostly, but what kind of label would you put on yourself, or would you rather not? Are you a centrist? What would you say?
Well, if you talk to Jeremy Nell, Germ Warfare, he'd say there's no such thing as left and right, and that's a nonsense. And it's actually some merit to what he says there, I think. But I think we all do fall somewhere in a spectrum. But for me, I'm center right. I'm not a right-wing person, but some of the values I believe in, the sanctity of life, I find abortion to be abhorrent and murder. And so that's now that wasn't my view when I was a younger man. I was kind of agnostic towards it. I mean, I just but as you mature in life, you realize what's happening here. And to me, you're killing a child, and I'm sorry, I don't want to hear about it, especially when it's a form of birth control. That's immoral. So I mean, that's where I fall there. But I also am a firm believer in traditional liberal values. I mean, I believe in the tenets of our Constitution, the things that we declared independence for. So, these natural rights, these God-given rights, and I actually believe there are God-given rights: the right to freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of worship. I'm a strong believer in all of that, and I'll stand for that. I defended the Constitution. For that reason, we take an oath to the Constitution, not to the President of the Republic, but to the Constitution. So I'm center right, but as an economist, I'm a fiscal conservative. Government should be small. It should be circumspect. It should be controlled. It should not be something that people go, ooh, look at the politician. No, they're just better dressed used car salesmen or shyster lawyers who have the gift of gab and were able to win an election. Doesn't make them experts or geniuses. Some are, but few are. And so we need to take things in that light. So for me, that's kind of where I find myself, center right. And there's many other things I believe in, but basically small government, national defense. And another thing is, through my experiences in Africa, I would go around in uniform and I'd meet lots of Africans all over the continent. And a lot of people be very shy and nervous around people in uniform because they're afraid of the military. And I'd say, what's wrong? Well, I don't like soldiers. Why? Well, soldiers, they kill people and they murder people and they rape and pillage. And I said, no, those aren't soldiers. Those are thugs in uniform. Yeah. Professional soldiers protect people, property, and lives. That's what they do. And that's what I do in uniform. And even though I'm in a business where people get killed, I've saved more lives than you can count on one hand. You can count on a million hands. I wrote a presidential data brief when I worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency that saved 640,000 Black Africans in Southern Africa from starving to death. Not going hungry, starving to death.
My goodness.
So when I meet St. Peter, I'm going to pull that shit out and say, hey, this lets me in. All my sins, I get to come in just for this one, right?
That's an interesting understanding of the Bible.
Obviously, I'm being a little facetious.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good to hear. What I like about the way you're thinking and the mission to enlighten people is, we can try to put a label on it, but ultimately, what I like about it is that you are on a pursuit for truth and to share that truth with as many people as possible. And I think that's important, especially in a world where truth is apparently fluid, according to many, where we have lost objective reality. Somewhere along the line, it died a death, and especially in the COVID time. How do we successfully help people to get to the truth. You say you've got receipts, but I have found that even if you show people the proof, if they don't want to believe it, they won't. What do we do in this world, in this situation, where when someone is like, they will believe this and there's nothing you can do about it? Do you just move on to the ones who are open to it? Do you sometimes fight the fight? Do you debate, or do you just go, there's no changing these people? How do you see the whole thing about standing up for truth?
Well, I agree with you. One of the phrases I really detest is, it's my truth. There's no such thing as your truth.
Yeah.
There's simply the truth. There are the facts.
Amen.
And you're correct. Many people just do not want to believe the objective truth. They are stuck in their worldview. And I think that's a phrase that I use quite a bit, and it's applicable here. Someone's worldview. We all have a worldview as a result of our acculturation, of our experiences, of who we are, of our faith, our lack of faith. All that plays a role in our worldview. And for me, having grown up all over the place, been the outsider, been the underdog, and I made full colonel in the U.S. Army, and given my career path, not that I had a good career path, nothing to do wrong, but I took a non-traditional career path because I wanted to achieve things in uniform, but it ran contrary to the narrative and the positions you're supposed to. So the fact that I made colonel is in no small way a miracle, especially given the fact that out of an army of 575,000 military personnel, only 18 people in uniform held the rank and did what I did. So to get to that level from a group of 8,900 officers commissioned in 1989 to be one of that 158 who got promoted to full colonel the year I got promoted was something else. So I just I look at this, and when it comes to informing people, there are people you're never going to change. They're not, but they're not genuine people. They're propagandists. They're people with a narrative. They're people who want to achieve something bigger. If you realize that, you don't beat your head against the wall. But many people are simply misinformed or ill-informed or uneducated. I don't want to use the word ignorant because, we're all ignorant about things, but a lot of people simply don't know. And I like to put things in a context to just, expose things. So let me just give you a quick example this year. Whenever I hear EFF or the ANC or others in South Africa talk about Europeans' descendants in South Africa, Africans, white Africans, as colonists and colonizers, I'm like, or settlers, that's their favorite phrase. I'm like, oh, you mean just like the Nguni speaking peoples? What do you mean? Oh, they're not from South Africa. Yes, they are. No, they're not. They arrived in the region 600 years ago. No, they didn't. You're making this up. You're a right-wing white supremacist, Klan member. No. We have the receipts. We have the archaeological evidence when they crossed the Zambezi River. We have linguistic evidence of the development of the Nguni languages. We have the origins of them in West Africa and Cameroon going back a few thousand years. We've seen the migration of this group of people who are the most successful colonists in all of Africa and arguably much of the world other than the English, is they went all across Africa, went to the east, ran into a group of people that they couldn't defeat or assimilate, and moved south down the Rift Valley. We have all the evidence. So if you want to talk about the original inhabitants, then you got to talk about the Khoi and San. But honestly, and this is where I really blow people's minds, I said, although I'm a huge supporter of the Khoi and San and colored folks in South Africa in particular, the thing is that they're not even the original inhabitants. Go to Sterkfontein, the cradle of humankind, and we find the remains of Homo naledi. We're finding hominids that were back there long before that. So, this argument about who came first and who owns it is juvenile at some point. People are people. We're human beings. People need to learn to live together and tell the truth. And it's the same thing like when I talk about Zimbabwe and they're like the land was stolen. Yeah, you say that, but that 38% of the commercial farmers in Zimbabwe bought their farms after 1980 when Mugabe was prime minister and then president after 88 up till the year 2000. And 42% of all commercial farmland in Zimbabwe changed hands at least one time with the express approval of Mugabe's government from 1980 to 2000. Much of that land changed hands 3 or 4 times because farmland often gets sold to different people. And so if the government of Zimbabwe wanted to return the land to war veterans or to black Zimbabweans, they could have purchased 42% of the farmland and had almost half of it in the hands of black commercial farmers by the year 2000. But what they did is they took the money and they bought farms for Sharon Spiri, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, and all the Constantine Chiwengo and all the people tied to ZANU-PF, the leaders and the police and the intelligence services, Central Intelligence Organization, the Zimbabwe Defense Force, the politicians, and the rest of the money they put in their pockets. And so they didn't buy farms to give to poor people or to war veterans. And then they lied about it and turned it into a race issue. And one thing that really irritates me, Heinz, is racism. There's no such thing as race in my view. We're all Homo sapiens. We're all humans. And our Creator We've created a certain image. Some of us have darker skin pigmentation. Some of us got cheated. I mean, look at me. I'm pink. I got robbed. I mean, the sun doesn't like me, man. I want a rebate. I want my reparations from the sun.
I hear you. And that is the thing. I mean, why it seems that when racism is white to black, it's the worst evil in the world. But when it is black to white or black to colored, it's suddenly okay. I know, just from speaking to the black South Africans I know, that there's a huge hatred between Xhosa and Zulu even. So there's all kinds of differences that lead to issues, and depending on people's background, their level of maturity, their education, the fights get worse or less. But there'll always be those kinds of things. I think it's about what's happening, top down, and this reaction that we've seen recently in the way that we are being governed, and calling it, reparations, or calling it something of we need to reverse the past. At some point, we have to recognize that A, this is not working. B, this has now gone beyond what you said it was going to be, and we are at a point where we need a new system. From your perspective, what if you could advise our government on how to fix the nation and build better going forward, what would that be? What would the first couple of things be that you would say to them what we should be doing?
Boy, there are so many things, but I think I need to point something out that I talk about quite frequently. But one of the problems we have in society, in the developed world and in South Africa and across Africa as well, is the default commentary that something that offends us is racist because someone's a different appearance. Most of what we're talking about isn't racist. To me, racism, the definition of racism, is somebody that believes there are different races and believes it's appropriate to confer favor or put disadvantage to somebody based on their race. And that, so when you put that in place, when you put 145 laws in place to punish people or to give advantage to someone else, that's racist. Yeah. Because you're advancing one group of people over another, over an immutable fact. I didn't pick my skin color. I didn't choose to be so devastatingly handsome. Nature just did that. So no, the point here is that these are immutable facts. We have no control over them. You can control what faith you have. You can control your behavior. You can control your success to some degree. I mean, external factors play a role. But the character, what's in your heart, is something you have control over. How you treat people is what you control. And we should be judged for that. Not for our appearance, whether we're, people, you can judge a book by its what's a judge? Anyway, I got the phrase wrong, but my point is
don't judge a book by its cover.
That's right. Don't. Thank you very much. That was stuck in the buffer back there on that hard drive. Yeah. So yeah, don't judge a book by its cover. I remember very vividly one of the first Afrikaners in my life that I ever came across. And if this had stuck with me as an impression of who Afrikaners are, I would be very much against Afrikaners, the people. But I'm not a bigot and I'm not a racist. So I was in the Maun area of Botswana in the Okavango, and I went into Marimi Game Park about 30 years ago. And as I went in, I had to spend an hour and a half trying to get in because this white Afrikaner was being abusive towards the game ranger. And he was doing it in a fashion that sort of thing we saw from the behavior of a number of people during the apartheid era. Talking down to him like you're a boy, and then who are you? And this is a ranger, who had a firearm, who was a law enforcement official, and he was refusing to pay for an extra day because you pay per day. And he's coming out, and they're like, you only pay for one day. You spent 2 nights in there. You have to pay. And he didn't want to pay. It was equivalent of like $30. And he wasted an hour and a half of my life while we're sitting there. We couldn't get in, arguing with this. And I was like, that's just wrong. But what I learned from that is not that white people are evil or they're rude to black people or Afrikaners are bad, but that guy was a jerk. That's what I learned. And then when I was a kid, I was about 6 or 7 years old, maybe. And I lived in a housing project in Maryland with 300 families. This is welfare housing, poor, government provided housing. And everybody was black except 3 families. And my best friend, Goody, that was actually his name. His parents should be horsewhipped for naming a child Goody. But
was his second name Two Shoes, or was he?
No, that's a good question. Touche, Heights. But so he and I were playing out on the steps, the back day behind the apartment building, bouncing with tennis ball or rubber ball off there, catching it like baseball players. And his teenage brother and his thug friends came around and started hassling us. And they pushed me to the ground and pinned me down by the shoulders. And you imagine I was only weighed so many kg. I was very light and skinny. My ribs were exposed back then. And he pulled a switchblade out, opened it up, and ran it across my throat and said, they're going to kill my honky blank.
Whoa.
And that's the sort of environment that I lived in. Now, did I learn that black people are evil? No, that guy was a jerk. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
So what I want to say going into this is that a lot of people confuse bigotry with racism. Much of what we see is bigotry. The good news, if there's good news in this story, is that bigotry is a learned behavior.
Okay.
Now, I don't believe this, so I'm going to say a few things that are controversial, and people need to take this into context. But, like a certain class, a group of people who have a certain faith are miserly or stingy, or they have all the money. And you know who I'm talking about. I don't believe in that, but that's a stereotype that's put out there. And so that's bigotry. Bigotry is learned. You're not born that way. You're not born racist. You're not. But what I find is that people are truly racist who truly believe that white is better than black or black is better than white. That's in their heart. It's hard to change those people. Not impossible. But bigotry reminds me of Archie Bunker and All in the Family, the actor Carol O'Connor. He was a bigot. He didn't like women, called his wife a dingbat. His daughter was stupid. His son-in-law was a Pollock. He didn't like Poles. He didn't anybody that wasn't white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant male. He was a bigot against. His neighbor, George Jefferson, was black, so he made all these black jokes and didn't like black. And then one day, he had a health crisis on the sitcom, and he went in the hospital. And he had to get a blood transfusion. His neighbor, George Jefferson, came in all haughty, like, hey, how you doing there, Bunker? What's going on? He said, yeah, I'm doing fine, Jefferson. What you doing here? So how you liking that black blood? He's like, black blood? What are you talking about? Oh, yeah, that blood going in, you came from a black man. And he turned white as a sheet. And it was at that point that Norman Lear used that as a technique. I'm certain that was his intent. He must be 90 or 100 years old now if he's still around. But used as a technique to show just how stupid bigotry is. Yeah. And to me, that's bigotry. We can unlearn bigotry. It may be hard, but we can do it. So back to your question, it was a long build up. How do I change things? Well, first off, BE has to go. It's racist. It's wrong. It's immoral. It discourages investment. That's why Starlink isn't in South Africa. They're not going to invest there. They have to give 30% of their equity to a group of people based simply on skin color. That's ridiculous. Giving people jobs because of their skin color doesn't right historical wrongs. Investing in education, investing in communities, investing in law and order, and having a way for people to settle disputes in courts. That's how you fix past injustices. And so instead of firing all the qualified English and Afrikaans speaking teachers and getting rid of them or pushing them in retirement in the late 1990s, they should have been training other teachers coming up and putting money in communities. But instead, we have a system in South Africa where the ANC has lowered their standards to pretend that people are high school graduates. 30% in 3 subjects and 40% in your first language is not a passing mark to matriculate and go out of high school. And they walk around making these false claims. Well, we have 88% graduation rate. No, you have more like a 15% graduation rate. And you're using that in the wrong fashion. That's not how you fix things. You fix things by actually getting proper education, proper investment, and not stealing all the money. I mean, when the South African government decided to buy arms, I was a military guy. I'm like, well, they're buying arms. $7 billion. That was $4 billion originally, but wound up being $7 billion in the end. Why do you need Gripen fighters? There's nobody in Southern Africa that can reach your airspace and endanger South Africa with jet fighters. Why are you buying diesel submarines? There's no one who threatens you. India is not threatening South Africa. China's not threatening South Africa. Why do you need Hawk Lead and fight? So they spend all this money, and that's money that could have been spent against HIV. Change behavior. That's money could have been spent in building communities. That's money could have been spent in keeping the fiscus straight. So to me, you get rid of BEE. Then if Cyril wants to have a national dialogue, the national dialogue has to be about honesty instead of wasting money for an ANC election campaign. But BE is the first thing that has to go. And from there, you have to fix the police. You have to invest in them. You have to have lifestyle audits for politicians, for police officers, public officials. But things have gone so bad so far and now so quickly in South Africa that it's going to take a Herculean effort to save this country. I'm not a Debbie Downer. I'm not a person that the sky is falling. But for the first time in 30 years, I'm truly concerned about the future of South Africa.
Yeah, I've spoken to Michael Louis. I don't know if you're familiar with him. And obviously I've listened to someone like Ernst Roots. And what they and many others are calling for is a complete, new system. Because the system at its core is rotten. There's Michael Louis would explain, he was in Parliament for 10 years in the beginning. And he said, he got out of it, and one of the reasons was that you would have agreements on voting a certain way for certain issues, and then before people get into the room, or while they're in the room, someone would whisper to them, no, if you just vote this way, then I will do this for you or whatever. And then they come out and the vote went another way from what they were expecting. And they kept getting stonewalled, kept getting, hurt by this thing, couldn't move forward. And many other things that he would mention was just the system is not a system on which you can build a fair, good governance way forward for the nation. So, and then if you listen to someone like Adams talking about, getting us, making the government, as you also said, smaller government, and maybe giving people authority over the specific cultures and areas, that could help the system. What do you think about those proposals and ideas? Is that something you agree with in general?
Well, for many years, I've said that South Africa doesn't really have a genuine democracy. It doesn't. I mean, first off, look, we've got our problems. Our system is far from perfect. I mean, in fact, Nancy Pelosi is still in Congress, despite the fact that she's obviously used insider trading to become fabulously wealthy over a visa deal that was crooked and dirty and never been investigated or prosecuted. Shows that we've got problems. No system is perfect. But at least in our system, we vote for those clowns. So it's our fault. It's our fault. The fact that Nancy Pelosi represents San Francisco is Californians' fault, and they can fix it.
Yeah, you vote for people, not for parties. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. In South Africa, you vote for a party, and they pick the clowns. I mean, we see Winnie Mandela is responsible for the death of Stumpy. Her thugs kidnapped him and beat him to death, and who knows how many other deaths are on her hands. Yeah. She was convicted of kidnapping by an apartheid regime, so we can say, okay, it was racially motivated, politically motivated. Okay, it wasn't, but let's go with that narrative. But then she was convicted of theft and corruption and embezzlement while she was a member of parliament under the ANC government. She was convicted of that. But she was still a venerated member of the ANC, still in parliament. Doctors Whaley and Kesey, the Hawks, have determined that he is guilty of corruption in the Digital Vibes case. All that happened to him is he had to resign as the health minister. He still collects, $1.3 million as a member of parliament, still has a job. Zandile Gumeda has 168 counts of corruption against her for 7 years now. It's finally at court, and she's still there. It took years for Ace Magashule to leave the stage and making a paycheck despite the Vreda dairy farm scandal, the asbestos tenders, and all the other stuff. And now we've got Paul Mashatile, who's supposedly credibly linked to the National Lottery scandal, not to mention the fact that he has 2 mansions that are worth 26 and 30 million rand. And how does he live in these places? He doesn't have a salary that supports that. This is a problem. We need lifestyle audits against these people, and you need the ability to vote for people so you can vote them out of office. So fundamentally, South Africa's system is corrupt, in my view, and it works against South African people's interests. Also, first past the post is maybe not the best system, particularly if you go first past the post and then you have a plurality candidate like Bill Clinton becoming the president because of our electoral college, where you have a candidate gets fewer popular votes, gets it. But I actually like our system. But that's another story. But my point here is that it may not be a perfect system, but in your system, you've got 85 billion political parties. Everything's a vanity project. The Good for Nothing Party, you've got MK Party, you've got EFF. These are vanity projects, not real parties of any substance. And they pollute the system and they create chaos and they get attention and scream. And it distracts from governance. And this is a problem. And also you have a system now, like with the Government of National Unity, where the ANC is a plurality party that could not roll without help. They needed the DA. The DA, for whatever reason, went into this conversation in a weakened position. They held all the cards. The ANC could not form a government because MK will not align with them. Zuma will eat the ANC from the inside. The EFF wouldn't have gone with them because it would have demanded like the deputy president and ministries, and then they would have been clowns, and the ANC would have damaged the ANC in a way that they couldn't recover from, so they never would have joined. And there weren't enough other parties that would give them from the 40.2% to 51% or 50 plus 1. And so the DA was the only option. And the DA walked into this, instead of getting anything in the security cluster, instead of getting finance, instead of getting foreign ministry, they got nothing. They got agriculture, they got communications, they've got home affairs. These are things that are broken that the ANC is going to take credit for fixing when it comes to the next election. And so the DA is shown they have no influence. The ANC is ruling as if they're 50 plus 1.
Yeah.
And everything in the National Democratic Revolution has come to fruition. Expropriation without compensation, national health insurance, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, now the transformation racist black tax is coming in at some point. The National Democratic Revolution is coming to fruition with the DA and the Freedom Front Plus and PA in the government. So,
sorry, say that
is broken.
You said the National Democratic
Revolution.
What is? Sorry, I'm not familiar with that term. I probably should be.
No, that's quite all right. The National Democratic Revolution is the driving philosophical concept behind the African National Congress. This is their idea to radically transform everything basically into a socialist economy with state ownership of things and making everyone a ward of the state in essence. So that the NDR, Dr. Anthea Jeffries is an expert on that. She's written a lot about it. She also wrote some great stuff on the People's War, which is how the ANC rose to prominence. The ANC was a spent force. After the Rivonia trial, they were eviscerated. There was nothing. Their leadership had to flee abroad. They had no influence. And for years, until they went to Vietnam in 1979, and they learned from Giap and the Vietnamese how to fight a people's war.
Wow.
And how to target centers of power and turn people against each other. And then, the necklacing campaign started in KZN, and they murdered many of the great and up-and-coming leaders of the Inkatha Freedom Party. And that's one reason why the Inkatha Freedom Party is not a major force today, is because they were eviscerated and had 20 or 30,000 of their up-and-coming leaders murdered during the necklacing era and the assassinations of the 1980s and early 1990s. And this is the true history of the ANC that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
They want to forget it. They want to talk about Rainbow Nation. Let's get along. That sounds nice. And if you're having a vermouth or an Amarula sitting down chilling with Cyril, he's a nice teddy bear to talk to. But the true history of the ANC is pretty dark.
Sure. Can we get back to the 145 race-based laws? That thing has been thrown around a lot, and I've heard the people on the other side going, yeah, that's not true. And they just say it's not true. Do you know, like 1, 2, 3 examples of laws that are actually worded in such a way that makes it obvious? I think some of the laws are by implication racial, but not overtly. You say you've got the receipts. Have you read some of those laws? Are you aware of what actually is going on in those laws? Because I don't know. I don't think many people have actually read them to be able to say definitively it's they are racist.
Yeah. It's like the Constitution. Everybody talks about it. Almost nobody's read it, whether it's my Constitution or yours. But to be fair, your Constitution is like 78 pages. It's a long one. So it's a lot.
It is long now.
Yeah. So yes, I have, and I can give you a couple examples. First off, not specific, but any law that includes the phrase "for the historically disadvantaged" is already racist to begin with. You should be making decisions based on historically disadvantaged or skin color. That's what that's all about.
Okay.
But specific things, I can go to a policy that came into play and how it played out during the COVID. I call it a scam, but during the COVID political events, the government of South Africa created the Tourism Relief Fund. Ostensibly, it was to help businesses because tourism was shut down. Hotels, travel agents, tour guides, knickknack sellers, all these different things. You couldn't do business because nobody could move about, and so these places were failing. So they came up with the Tourism Relief Fund, and they put money in, but it said only for historically disadvantaged South African businesses. So here's the problem with that. That means if your business is white, Indian, or colored owned, and now they say that historically disadvantaged includes whites or includes colors and Indians, but in practice, talk to Indians and colors, you'll find out that whenever that legislation is there, they're still aced at everything in favor of black South Africans. It may say it in the law, but in practice, they don't get anything for the most part. But what happened was that money was doled out to people who own black businesses. Well, who do you think works for the lodges that are owned by white people? Purple people? No, mostly black South Africans, I mean, so it's a stupid thing to begin with, because if you cause a business to go under because you shut them down because you won't let people move about, and then you only give money to their competitors and you drive them out of business, everyone loses. So here's what happened. That went to the North Gauteng High Court, and that idiotic court, which was captured, said that it's legal because the Constitution says we have to redress past injustices. Well, that's a very liberal definition and interpretation of the Constitution of the law. So it went to the Constitutional Court. It was appealed. And later, months later, it was proven to be unconstitutional and racist. But all the money was gone. So it wasn't much money to begin with, but all the money was gone, and they achieved what they wanted. They handed money out in a patriots fashion to black-owned businesses and caterers so that they could curry favor with them, and they harmed all the other businesses. That's one example. Then you have the example of you have things that are not specifically, in my view, written to say, as you say, call out race, but they're definitely done to give the government power, and they have obvious targets. And the most recent one is expropriation without compensation. That law is written, and it affects all South Africans, but the intent of it is to take land from people who are landowners. And many of the landowners are white, and this false narrative and argument over land in South Africa is what's driving that. But there are many, many other laws that specifically say that. So the 145 figure, it was 142, but then EWC came in, the Bella Bill came in, and that was added to the tally. Martin van Staden is a guy who, from Institute of Race Relations, who does this analysis. I've read a few of these laws, not all 145. I mean, I'm not that interested in those laws. I'll trust his analysis. But in fact, it's the case. And you don't even need the laws. Let me show you the chilling effect of it. The fact that you have broad-based Black economic empowerment is only supposed to affect government tenders. So if you want to tender with the government, you want to contract to do business with the government, you're supposed to be a majority Black-owned business. That's not right. That's racist.
Yeah.
But even if we accept that as being morally right, that plays out in so many other spheres. So a lot of businesses don't deliver the goods and services that they sign up for. They have subcontractors. I know I'm a subcontractor for work I do in the States for the defense industry. And so you hire subcontractors. Well, the subcontractors weren't required to be BBE certified. Well, now because of the pressure from government on these businesses, many of these folks are forced to be BE certified. And so they force their subcontractors to do it. And if they can't meet it, then it goes to someone that is BE qualified. So here's an example of how this plays out in the private space. You may have seen this. Bidvest has a bursary for school students, and it's available to their employees that make less than 15, or is it at least around 15,000 rand. I think it's less than or around that, and they have to have worked for them for 2 years. These are reasonable expectations. You work for the company, you should be there a period of time, not just walk in the door and get these benefits. But the bursary, it goes on, is only for Blacks, Indians, and coloreds. Whites are not welcome. Now, that's a consequence of BEE, because the law's in place. This company exists in its fashion that's in today because the favor is shown upon it by a racist law, and it's playing out in the private sector, and it's wrong. So I mean, that's not a specific example of a law, but it ties to the law that forces BE, and it plays out in the private sector. The thousands, and literally thousands, Heinz, of South Africans that watch my program or write to me and complain about how they applied for the job and they were told privately, and they have an email sometimes, and they've shown it to me in the past, or a WhatsApp message screenshot, that you're the best qualified candidate, but we can't hire you because you're white or because you're colored.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how it plays out, and that's how the law plays out. So whether it was well intended or not, it's the result of unintended consequences if it was well intended. But whenever you create laws that give people favor based on the immutable facts of their existence, you've got a problem, and that's what we're talking about here. So yes, these laws are out there, and some of them do explicitly call this out. But usually, when you see the phrase "historically disadvantaged," you can start labeling it racist, because the intent is to favor a group of people over the bogus argument that they were discriminated in the past. But here's the problem I have with that: Tokia Sexwale's children are mixed race, but they qualify for BE.
Wow.
They're half white. Their mom was a white lawyer.
Yeah.
So why should they get advantage over a white kid born in Northwest Province in 2000 who can't get a bursary to go to university? But Tokia Sexwale's kids, he's a billionaire, they get to go to school for free. That's just one example. That is just how morally bankrupt this becomes. And so I think that's part of the problem here. We had racism in the U.S. for a long time, and everybody accepted it because of the historically past. Well, that's nonsense. What we had was affirmative action. People were hired and given more points to be hired for government work or access and entry into law schools and university based on their skin color, not their qualifications. And a lot of times what you do is you bring people who aren't qualified because they didn't have a proper education where they came from, but they're only getting because they're Black, and then they go to law school and they fail. Well, now you've kept a white person or Asian person out of law school who is qualified, who probably graduated, wasted that slot, putting someone who's unprepared, instead of making sure that where that Black kid came from had proper education and was prepared for school and ready to go to university. That's how you fix things. But this stupid elevation of people based on things we can't change is just wrong. And people refuse to see that sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And something I've discussed with a few people as well is, I think most of us that have this kind of like-mindedness, we would say meritocracy is the way to go. We want people to be the best people for the job should be the ones who get it. But there is this thing there is unfortunately a reality of things that have disadvantage some people, but the answer is not to push them into positions they are not ready for, because they are then labeled as you only have the job because, and someone else does not have the job because, instead of you own it, it's yours, you worked for it, and it's rightfully yours. There must be a way to rather work towards that in a healthy meritocracy, and I agree with you. There should be some form of healthy education things in place where those people or everyone across the board, or at least some of the main centers, start to reach out in an effective way to educate those to be able to compete fairly for the same job. I think that's where we should be working towards. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that?
I agree 100%. And look, you do get this mentality where people on all sides of the spectrum go, well, that person got that because this. But even a lot of the people who wind up in positions kind of have that nagging feeling, I only got this because of this. I mean, look, I don't mean to pick at a scab, but I'm going to pick at a scab. Okay. So, and that's, everyone remembers 2018 in Ashwin-Willemse. Or maybe they remember, and what happened with Nick Mallet and Nas Botha in the booth when Ashwin he had a meltdown. Yeah. Look, I mean, I thought he was a good commentator, a pretty decent rugby player. I never thought Ashwin Willemse got his calling and got his jersey because he was colored and they were trying to balance things out. I never thought that. Gio Aplon around the same time frame was a little bit later. That was one of my favorite rugby players. He's a colored guy. I mean, I don't think he got the job because he was colored. I mean, look at it today. We're not even having this conversation about the talent that comes up, and people shouldn't have to think that they got it or feel that it's because of this. Look, the bottom line with all this, Heinz, is that people just need to treat people with respect and honor, and that's the bottom line. But so many people wrapped up in warped worldviews, and I come back to the phrase worldview, or the term worldview, that it's difficult to overcome this nonsense at times. And you asked me earlier about what do you do? Well, some people will never change because they have objectives. I don't have an objective. And I got to tell you, that's one of the things you're asking about. People told me earlier, I probably called a lot of names. When I started doing this on YouTube a few years ago, what's your angle? What do you want? What are you here for? And so Ronaldo, I do a show with Ronaldo called Wednesdays with the Colonel. And he would always joke for a long time that I was in South Africa for the oil. Of course, there's no oil in South Africa, but note. So that's nonsense. I always said, no, I've come for the boredom I see. That's what I'm there for. So that's why I'm in South Africa. So yeah, well, we used to have this dating service in America called farmersonly.com. So I used to joke about that all the time, farm girls. But so
now we have boerse vrou over here. Yeah,
that's right. As a farmer's looking for a wife. Yeah. But so it's people just really. Some people are not going to let go of that worldview, and so you do your best to encourage them. But I find that more people than less are willing to listen. Last night I had a guy come on who had an interesting username. I got the impression he was Zulu, and he was asking me all these questions. So what do the Americans want? What are they after? And what do they really want? And I could sense that it was probably a genuine question because you can usually sniff the trolls out. There are plenty of them. And it turned out it was a genuine question. He was willing to listen. Now, I don't know that I changed his worldview, and I hope I didn't change his worldview, but I hope I made him think when I point out all the things that the South African government, the ANC in particular, have done to insult and undermine the United States and our foreign policy. And just in the last week or so, all the things that they've done, Ronnie Lamola lying, saying America apologized for not coming to the Sherpa conference. No, they did diplomatic protocol. They sent a note saying we're unable to attend because we're at the NATO summit. And he comes on the media for a domestic audience. Well, we'll accept that as an apology. The Americans have apologized. We didn't apologize. And then, all the other nonsense, not even sending a senior representative to the U.S. Africa Business Summit in Luanda in the midst of a tariff war, they've done nothing. So that's another insult. And then, of course, Ramaphosa running around the things he says. And then Ibrahim Rasool calling Trump the leader of a global white supremacy movement and calling Americans racist. I mean, these are just the minor things. The Lady R not signing an Article 98 waiver, training Chinese fighter pilots at South African aviation schools to shoot down American aircraft and NATO aircraft. These are some of the things that South Africa's government has done against American interests. And they all think it's Trump. Nah, legislation was introduced in 2024 under the Biden administration to sanction ANC leaders and leaders in the government for their actions contrary to U.S. national interest. So this is long simmering, and it just happens to be that Trump is the guy that had the nads to do something about it. So yeah, you can't change everybody, but you can change enough people, or at least get them to think. And that's what I want people to do, think. I mean, look, I look at your full name. It's your full name. And it reminds me of my ancestry because I have an interesting ancestry. I'm a Viking of a Northern European ancestry, but German is a big part of my ancestry. And I go back and I do, because I'm a genealogist, I have 26,000 people in my family history tree. And if I go back to the Germans, in the 19th century and going back, they're like you, Germans, Heinz, Karl, Heinrich, Winkler, and all these names, like Amalia, Maria, Teresa, that was what Lutherans and Catholics did in the German world. So, I mean, I don't know what your origin is, but I mean, having all those names, that's very German.
Yeah, from my dad's side, I'm German. My great grandfather was a Moravian missionary from East Germany to South Africa. He actually worked at mission stations among the colored people in Elim and right here, Genadendal. So yeah, that's a great heritage to come from on my dad's side. My mom's side seems to come from a more of a French and Dutch background. Yeah, so a bit of a European cocktail, as many of us are.
Well, as all of you are. I mean, I always get a kick, go back to the Netherlands. Okay, that's not going to work, number one. These folks have been there for 350 years, number one. Number two, most of the DNA contribution to an Afrikaner today is actually German. It's the largest contribution to the admixture. German, then Dutch, then French Huguenot, and then a bit of Khoi and San, and some Asian in there too.
Let's be honest.
That's in the DNA. That's the fact. That's the truth. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are surprised to discover that. And that's one reason why this concept of racism is so stupid. I remember the young lady, Sandra was her name, I think, in the 1980s, growing up, or late 70s, whose parents were both white, Afrikaners, and she and her brother, he looked more white, but she looked very colored. And they're like, the mother slept around. She didn't sleep around. That's just a result of DNA, because they had an ancestor a couple generations back that was either black or colored, and so that woman was discriminated against and treated poorly. You shouldn't treat people based on things they can't change. You should treat them based on how they behave, the content of their character. I love Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He had a dream that one day his kids would be judged on the content of their character, not the color of their skin, and that's a guidepost for me.
Absolutely,
that's a guidepost for me.
Yeah, I had not really a friend, but someone I knew at university, and he's got quite a dark skin for a white guy. In Afrikaans, we say he's blas, which is a reference to a very dark kind of olivey skin. He said as a child, because he's 5 years older than I am, and he still kind of grew up in a very apartheid world as a toddler, as a young kid, and as a child, he would have trouble. His parents would go to the beach with him, and then police would ask them to leave because he's not allowed to be on the beach, just because of this. As you say, literally just his melanin is different. So it's crazy world.
It's stupid. I mean, we need to get past that.
Yeah.
But we're not going to get past that when people keep living in the politics of revenge and the politics of victimization. Yeah. That's one reason why, if you look at America very quickly here before we wrap up, because I know we got to wrap up soon. But if you look at America, one of the things that holds back a lot of Americans, especially Black Americans, is wallowing in self-pity and victimization. Yeah. So what do I mean by that? If America's a systemically racist country that is lined so that keeping Black people in poverty and in crime-ridden neighborhoods, how does that explain the nearly 3 million Black Africans who've migrated here since 1990, who are now financial consultants on Wall Street, own businesses, own restaurants, they own taxi services, they're managers at Home Depot? Almost every Black African whom I know, and I know a lot of them in America, has become wildly successful in America. The system is not systemically racist. People wallow in self-pity and victimization, and that's a big part of the narrative in South Africa. And nobody in South Africa is saying that phrase. And I really haven't spent time using that phrase, but I think I'm going to start using it more and apply it to South Africa, because wallowing in victimization and, everything is Jan van Riebeck's fault, everything is apartheid's fault. No, it's not. The ANC has had 30 years to fix things, right the ship, and they've made it worse. There are 3 times as many Black South Africans living in abject poverty today as under apartheid.
Yeah,
poverty is worse than ever was, and there's no hope. It's just despair for many people, and that is entirely a consequence of ANC governance, not apartheid.
Yeah, it's a sad mixture of victimization and entitlement. I deserve, but I'm not willing to work for it. And it just comes to what we have now. And same, I know many South Africans from many backgrounds that are very successful because they work really hard. They studied, they work really hard, they've got a good work ethic, they get up, they are driven, they are passionate, they are changing lives, and we have many of those. And unfortunately, many of them have chosen to leave the country because they cannot do what they feel they're called to do, they're able to do, so they go and find another place to do it. And that's very sad. I mean, we've got millions of diaspora around the world who could have been changing this country into what it's definitely has the potential to be. And I hope that in some way, some form, soon we can change all of that. So yeah, I trust God for that.
100% with you. 100% with you, Heinz. I mean, you can't shake a dead cat at Canary Wharf without hitting a Zimbabwean banker. They should be in Harare. No, I'm serious. Go there. I mean, I've been to Canary Wharf. I've been there many times during the Olympics, during the Rugby World Cup, and I go there because I remember when Canary Wharf was being developed, they called it a white elephant that was going to bankrupt and destroy England. But no, it's turned out to be a brilliant idea, and it's full of bankers and full of Zimbabweans, and now a fair number of South Africans. They should be in Pretoria and Joburg or Cape Town, and they should be in Harare, not there. I mean, I don't begrudge them being there because that's where the money's at, but the point is that human capital is there. Your nurses are in the UK, your nurses in the US and Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Your entrepreneurs, I mean, Elon Musk could have been big in South Africa, not big in Japan, but big in South Africa.
And I mean, so many people are in Dubai, Abu Dhabi. It's just everywhere. I mean, the cool thing is you can go anywhere and find South Africans, but the sad thing for me is when people left out of either fear for their lives or a hopelessness, like this is not working. I can't find, sustainable work, and you can understand that. I'm a big proponent of not doing anything out of fear, but I've not been held at gunpoint in my home, so I can't speak to every situation. But it's scary, and I mean we see it in the Western Cape. We see this semigration happening on a massive scale. The schools can't even handle the amount of children that are suddenly in the Western Cape because people are, those who can't go overseas, they're coming here, and it's crazy what we're seeing right now. But yeah, before we wrap up, I do want to quickly, if we have a few more minutes,
sure, we have a little time.
Just get your input on. You mentioned it briefly earlier, the whole tariff situation with the US and South Africa, and then I know the G20 summit is coming up. What are your thoughts on that? Just quickly, if you can talk about that, please.
Well, I'll be honest, I was caught a little bit by surprise when Trump announced reciprocal tariffs and the level he came up with, like 98% for Lesotho. Ouch. But the whole thing that the South African government narrative is giving now, that the average tariff is 7.6% and 77% of goods are exempt from tariff coming from the U.S. is just total nonsense. South Africa has quotas, and they have veterinary requirements for pork products that are unnecessary to protect safety. They're put in place to keep our goods from coming in there. And so the figure that they came up with, we could argue about whether it's right or not, but to me, it's unfortunate. And what's even more unfortunate is that the lack of genuine effort by the South African government to engage the Trump administration to work out a deal. And then on top of that, their total lack of interest in actually saving jobs. We're talking about 141,000 jobs in the automotive industry alone that are directly tied to the export of 25,530 automobiles to the United States every year. Those jobs will disappear. South Africans can't sell their cars in America with a 30% premium. That's not going to happen. And then on top of that, your agricultural products, your wine, and I get these people come on my channel and also put comments in my videos prepare about this. Well, Americans will pay, consumers pay. No, we won't. Instead of paying, $14 for a bottle of South African wine, I'll get just as good or better quality wine from Germany for $8 without the tariffs on it. And my package store sells that. And as far as cars, I don't need a BMW X3 from Roslyn produced there for 2026. I can get one made in Alabama for thousands of dollars less because you've just added 30% to a $50,000 car. That makes it $65,000. I'm not going to pay that. And then the $65,000, I'm paying sales tax on top of that. Yeah. So I got to pay even more. So, I mean, this is heartbreaking. I'm very frustrated by it. And I think that South Africa is not only going to be hit with the 30%, but there's a fair chance they're going to get hit 40% because Trump was angry at the oblique attack that the BRICS leaders took against the United States and against Trump on Sunday. And so he fired back on Truth Social. That's a dangerous spot. Yeah. He said, any country that supports BRICS policies, there's an additional 10% tariff. It's non-negotiable. Well, if you're a BRICS member, you support BRICS policies. So, and the really sad part about that is BRICS doesn't even exist. It's vaporware. There's no treaty. There's no organization. There's no mutual defense agreement. There's no freedom of labor moving from Beijing to Joburg to Moscow. You can't just do that. And there's no visa, there's nothing. It's just a cafe clutch where people get together and moan about the developed world and plot against the developed world. That's what the BRICS is.
Really?
That's the bottom line.
Oh, wow.
Okay. People think it's real.
It seems very formalized, but okay. Interesting.
No, there's just conferences. There's virtually no agreement. There's no agreement amongst the players for all these different issues.
Wow.
There are nascent agreements on a bilateral basis here and there. But look, the European Union has surrendered a degree of sovereignty, the countries, to the European Union. So they regulate agricultural policy. They regulate movement with Maastricht. They regulate with currency Maastricht, Schengen for movement. These are things where they've given up sovereignty. There's no such thing with BRICS. No such thing at all. And there's no mutual defense agreement. So,
so what's the point, really? Yeah. Okay.
Well, the point is a cafe clutch complain about the developed world. That's what it's all about, and plot against the developed world and try to upset the international order. It's like AGOA. All these people in South Africa that suddenly have heard of AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, don't even know what it is. We've got your Minister of Agriculture in Parliament going, we can still save AGOA. Dude, it's over. It's a public law. It's not a trade policy. It's not something Trump can just go, you know what, I'm going to extend AGOA. It's a law. The law expires on 30 September. I warned South Africa 18 months ago that it was going to go away because no one is championing a renewal of the act, which gets renewed every 5 years since 2000.
Wow.
And now it's going away. And we've got Davi Ruud saying that the tariffs have destroyed AGOA. The tariffs have nothing to do with AGOA. He's a brilliant economist, but he's mistaken. AGOA is already gone. And these tariffs, unfortunately, are going to destroy South Africa's economy. Because while China may be the largest trading partner, the most important trading partner is the U.S. You get benefication in the value chain.
Okay. Is it true that my understanding is the fact that we are being these tariffs are being put on us is because of our long-standing position against the United States, our government's long-standing position against the United States, voting against them at the UN, the case against Israel. Is that one? I'm sure there's many reasons. I think you mentioned some earlier as well. But this tariffs, is it mainly about that? Is it kind of to force South Africa to retreat some of their positions? And if they do, the tariffs will go away?
Nope. It has nothing to do with it. That's a misnomer. That's South African media's propaganda.
All right.
They're spoon feeding South Africans this narrative, and it's nonsense. The things we talked about, you just mentioned things I talked about earlier, are why there's a breach in diplomatic relations between South Africa and the United States. Nothing to do with the tariffs. There were no tariffs. Trump didn't introduce any tariffs when he issued his executive order on the 7th of February. All he did was suspend and end U.S. foreign aid to South Africa. That's not a sanction. That's nothing to do with tariffs. He didn't raise tariffs. The tariffs are a whole separate issue.
Okay.
But before we can fix the diplomatic relationship, the U.S. apparently has some demands. And I'll be interviewing Dr. Corney Mulder rather belatedly. I was supposed to interview him in the States when he was here, but the scheduling didn't work out now that he's been on every other broadcast and people are asking the questions I wanted to ask. But so I'm going to talk to him about that because I want to know why the U.S. government hasn't publicly announced what the demands are and why they would let the Freedom from Plus know about it, not the rest of us. I'm curious about that. But those demands have nothing to do with
so they're unrelated. There's just tariffs.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, because the whole world got tariffs, Heinz. That's what. See, this is what drives me nuts about South Africa's media and its politicians. Two things. When Trump ended foreign aid to South Africa, he didn't end it to South Africa. He suspended it globally. Yeah. And what did the ANC do? Oh, these racists are picking on South Africa. I didn't hear Liberia or Ghana or Myanmar. Well, no, we weren't getting Myanmar, but that's a bad example. Or Bangladesh go, oh, they're picking on us. They're like, crap, we lost our aid. Yeah. What's going to happen? But no, the South Africans took it personally and made a big stink about it. So that's the first thing. And then
I think Kenya actually said that's probably a good thing. We should take care of ourselves, which is a good response.
Kenya did say that, but President Ruto's in a little bit of trouble now with the Saba demonstrations going on. But South Africans acted like it was personal, and the media there go with this whole thing. Trump is aggressive towards South Africa. He didn't attack South Africa. It's our money. It's being misused, it's being poorly used, and we're getting nothing but abused for it. So why should we give South Africa $500 million in foreign aid every year when the response from the South African government about HIV money and PEPFAR, which we've given for 22 years in a 5-year emergency program to give countries 5 years to get the resources together to address the AIDS pandemic in their countries. 22 years later, $143 billion, and 30 million people haven't died because of HIV, because of our intervention. And what do we get from the South African government? Well, the Americans only contribute 17% to fight HIV, and their money doesn't matter. And now what do we hear? Now we're racist because your entire surveillance and monitoring monitoring system is broken down because virtually every person monitoring HIV positive people in South Africa was paid for by the American taxpayer. And there's virtually no medical or scientific research taking place at Rhodes, UCT, UNISA. All the money for research was being funded by not South Africans, but by Americans. And it's all gone. So now they're demanding 2 billion rand at UCT to do research from the government. There's no 2 billion rand there. So the problem here is that this nonsense about we were targeted. You weren't targeted. Everyone got the tariffs, and it has nothing to do with Gaza. Same thing with when he issued the order. Oh, this is because of Gaza. No, that's not because of Gaza.
So then it's probably about the broader thing of America first. We're gonna take what's ours, use what's ours. It's us first, and then later we'll check about helping other nations. So is it America first?
I can understand where you come to the conclusion, but I think that's an unfair characterization.
Okay.
So I think yesterday what we saw in the White House is a very interesting development. We had yesterday in the White House 5 African leaders, one of whom was a little bit too obsequious and was sucking up the teacher a little too much from Senegal, but African leaders who were professional, polite. They complimented President Trump. They thanked him for the invitation. And then they said, look, we want to be partners with the U.S. This is what we have to offer. You have plenty to offer us. We'd like to work together. You did a great job, finally getting a peace agreement in the Congo and so on and so forth. And I think what happened there is that if people are paying attention, did what Trump is trying to do. Trump is trying to finally end this idiotic concept of aid and shift to trade. U.S. has talked about it for 25 years, but we've not really made a significant effort to push African countries to be more involved in trade and investment, because that's what Africa needs. It doesn't need aid.
Yeah.
You know this phrase, teach a man to fish, don't give him a fish every day. So
that makes so much sense.
Yeah. I think that's where Trump...
We should make a bumper sticker, from aid to trade. That makes a lot more sense.
I think that's where Trump is trying to go. That's my impression. It's not so much just taking America. And also, here's the other thing. The global media, and especially South African media and American media too, they always go, as if Make America Great is an isolationist position. It's not. It's not. It's about restoring American glory and American exceptionalism, and not to the detriment of the world. But, we've allowed our country to be eviscerated and put ourselves in an awkward position by shipping our industrial capacity to Asia for a few cents of margin on the dollar instead of making it here. We have the most talented people in the world, and that's because we're a magnet for South Africans and Brits and Mandarin speaking Chinese and Australians and Ghanaians who come here because of our entrepreneurial environment, because of our business environment, because of our infrastructure, and all the things that are actually true about this country, not what the media tells you about this country. And so, there's a reason why America is successful, and it's not because we're geographically isolated, although it doesn't matter in the 21st century. It did in the 17th, 18th, and 19th. But it's also not because we're endowed with riches. Many countries have riches. Look at Russia. It's not a powerhouse. Look at the Congo. It has more resources and riches than you could ever imagine. It's a basket case. It's because being an American is an idea. It's a concept. It's not an ethnicity. It's not a race. It's not a faith. It's about being an American. And that and our founding concepts of natural rights, when that is applied appropriately, this country flourishes. And amazing. We welcome immigrants. We naturalized 840,000 foreign nationals as American citizens last year. That is more than double the rest of the world combined. Yes. Yet we're called anti-immigrant. It's nonsense.
That's amazing. It's just awesome to hear proper facts and truth and get a whole other perspective. I don't know if this is something you want to talk about quickly, but with the G20 summit coming up in our nation, being hosted, what are your thoughts on that? How's that going to go? Is America still not joining? What's the latest on that? Do you know?
Well, there'll be an American delegation. There'll be somebody there because the mantle of leadership is turned over from South Africa to the U.S. It's our turn. So someone will be there to take the
baton.
Yeah, take the baton. Yeah. So that's going to happen. Whether President Trump goes is the question, and that's the thing that's up in the air right now. Honestly, I think at this stage, President Trump will go for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that depending on where he's at, if he's at a point where we get more trade agreements, he'll go there to G20 to crow about how America is, he's going to do that. That's a great opportunity. And then also America is taking charge of the G20 again. That's another big publicity thing. A third thing is that, when Ramaphosa, and Trump knows this, Ramaphosa, makes these comments in 2018, 2019, I don't know what Trump knows about South Africa, but he can keep his America. We'll keep our South Africa. Well, Trump can say, well, I know about South Africa. I've been here now. Shut up, Junior. So, I mean, that's probably going to be part of it. But ultimately, I think, I suspect, I can't guarantee, but I suspect that President Trump will be at the G20 summit because we take over. If we weren't taking over, I think he would not go to embarrass South Africa. But he can embarrass South Africa in a much bigger fashion by going there and making them look like chumps if he wants to. But I think that he'll probably go. I think that's the bottom line. So I wouldn't lose a lot of sleep over it. And the bottom line is this. I think the G20 is a joke, personally.
Okay.
The problem with organizations is the bigger they get, the harder it is to reach consensus and get things done. The G20 can't get anything done. It's another Kaffeeklatsch. The G7 was big enough, but when we invited Russia to be an observer, that's a joke. I mean, if it wasn't for nuclear weapons, nobody even noticed Russia exists. Their economy is a joke. It's run by a bunch of oligarchs. They have no entrepreneurial spirit. It's just an extractive business for the most part, and Russia has no influence in the world. So why people align with Russia? It's got nuclear weapons. That's the only reason it's a threat and it matters.
Wow. Man, there's so many things I'd like to still chat to you about, but if you're open to it, maybe we should do a second session, or when you're in South Africa, we can maybe chat in person. But thank you so much for chatting to me today. Thanks for everything that you're doing. And I want to encourage everyone who's listening to please go and subscribe to your YouTube channel. I have done so you have one extra. And we'll get even more people to sign up and support what you're doing. I see you've already posted over 3,000 videos. That's crazy. You've been busy. Well done.
Actually, it's a lot more than that. I have several YouTube channels. And I've published over 3,000 on that channel. Plus, I've removed about 300 on that channel because I worry that YouTube might at the time when they were censoring people. So there's about 3,500 videos on that channel. My original channel had 1,800 before it was censored.
Goodness.
When they gave it back to me 2 years later, after I requested it for the third time, after that CEO left and they eased the censorship regime, I got immediately strikes. But they didn't give me a strike. They just said, this video violates their standards, this video. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're going to take the channel back right away. But they gave me a grace period. And so I hid over 1,000 of those videos. So I took 1,000 off. So I have 1,800 plus 3,500. That's 100 plus another 500 on my Rugby Ascendant channel because I do live play-by-play and color commentary of rugby. I interview a lot of rugby folks. I've interviewed Nas, Victor Matfield, Flo Silliers, Brian von Straten, the list goes on and on, plus current rugby players, and I do play-by-play and color commentary. So Saturday I'll be covering the Bucks, and I'm also an accredited journalist with the Bulls at Loftus. I go there and cover the games, and I love going to Loftus because that's my people up there, man. The Botswana and the Afrikaners. I mean, I go to Loftus and I walk around on the pitch and I get recognized 40, 50 times. People come down. I was out there at the one game last year for the semifinal because I was at the quarter, the semifinal, the final of URC, and Kurt Darren was down on the pitch, and all these people are coming down trying to get pictures of me when Kurt Darren was standing over my shoulder. It was pretty funny.
You should have gotten it. Yeah, that's funny. That's amazing. It's so weird to my South African ears to hear an American say all those names and know so much about rugby. It's not something you come across, ever. So it's very cool. When I visited the United States, people were surprised that I'm white. They had never heard of rugby. They didn't know what cricket was. It's a whole other thing. So you are very very cultured in knowing so much about our nation. It's very cool. And I love your jersey, by the way. That's a great jersey.
Hey, look, I've been a Springbok fan since 1982 when I was introduced to rugby at university, and I've been a Stormers fan since shortly after. Well, it wasn't Stormers fan; it was just Province, but a Province and then Stormers fan ever since. So for me, when it comes to rugby, it's. Let me see if I get this right. I used to have this phrase down, but I haven't used it in a while. I said so. For me, it's let's see, USA when they're playing, always the Springboks, never the All Blacks, and all but England.
That sounds about right. Yeah, I think most South Africans will agree. That's very cool.
Never the All Blacks and all but England. That's always the one I hold for the end. Yeah. So anyway, I'm on the white side, not for skin color, but for the Vitkant in the World Cup.
That's great. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. May God bless you and the mission that you're on. May many become enlightened with the truth that can be supported by actual facts, and may we meet again someday soon. Thanks so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. So thank you very much, and happy to come on the program anytime you want to discuss these things. There's a lot to unpack of what's happening. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the In HeinzSight BoldCast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it empowered you, equipped you, and at least made you think about a few things you may not have thought about before. We want to encourage you to leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with as many people as possible, and check out the other videos on this channel. There are some amazing conversations that you may not have heard yet from people that you may not be familiar with, but that have amazing things to share with you. So make sure you go and check them out. We also want to encourage you to go out and be bold, stand for the truth. Do not be ashamed of your biblical or more conservative worldview. It's time to stand up. It's time to speak up. Remember, boldness is contagious.